Friends, when we talk of India in cultural terms, we all too often forget that India is one of the few civilizations the world has seen. Not only that we are one of the few civilizations, we are a living civilization, unlike many civilizations which have been buried in history, like the Roman and the Mayan and the Attic, etc. This also means that India is one civilization with many cultures. There are many cultures in India, not simply one. And that also means that a country which has more than 4,600 sociologically definable communities, more than 700 languages and dialects, 8 living religions, several forms of costume and cuisine, many customs, innumerable hundreds of customs. All this come together to constitute the mind-boggling plurality called India. It is not for nothing that in some countries of the West, India is a plural noun. Indies, not simply India. Now, cultures plays an important role in the life of a people. Apart from embodying its material ambitions, it also embodies its spiritual dimensions, metaphysical and philosophical concerns. And surely, India too has this in abundance. One of the factors which has to be noted that India is not only plural, nothing is allowed in India to remain singular for a long time. Every singularity ultimately turns into plurality. Now, so the idea of one language, one religion, one set of rules, etc., just does not hold good in India. We have seen over the centuries that India has had 8 religions. 4 religions were invented in India, as it were, the Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism, and 4 came from outside, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, etc. And each of these religions have contributed greatly in art, in architecture, in metaphysics, in philosophy, in spirituality, in music, in theatre, in visual arts, in literature, etc. So the Indian plurality is also a cultural plurality. It's a very creative plurality. It also works in interaction and openness to each other. It could be said that Indians as a culture, as a civilization, let me go back to my earlier postulate that India is a civilization. It was a civilization which accommodated plurality. It accommodated plurality of visions, of anxieties, of values, of costumes and color and what you have. So it is not merely plural, it is open and accommodative. Also, religions, religious communities, social communities, ethnic communities, they have all been interacting with each other and learning from each other. There was a study conducted by 200 social scientists which arrived at the conclusion that India has 4,600 or more communities, and not one of them can claim to be racially pure. So from this, one can conclude that India is a ceaseless celebration of racial impurity, if you like. So nothing is pure, and all notions of purity in India, whether in language and religion and conduct, etc., seem completely irrelevant to the civilizational enterprise that India is. Now, culture, or to be more exact in terms of India, cultures in India are created, nurtured, changed, reformed by people. It is the people who create culture. The state has a very limited role. If you were to think in terms of percentages, one can think that 90% of cultures are created, reformed, changed, practiced, nourished by people, and only 10% falls in the lap of the state, and that too by way of providing infrastructure, by way of providing institutional framework. And it is these infrastructure and these kinds of institutional facilities which have been seriously damaged in the last decade or so. They have been undermined, they have been undervalued, they have become adjuncts of the state, whereas for a number of years and decades in our republic, they enjoyed autonomy. But that autonomy is now seemed to be a thing of the past. So one of the things that will have to be done is to come back and give cultures and cultural institutions their autonomy. Secondly, what is contained in culture is incredible corpus of knowledge, visions, ideas, critical insights, works of imagination, thoughts about language, meaning, sexuality, drama, music, dance, literature, spirituality, liberation, morality, conduct, fate, philosophy, logic, arguments, contestations, dialogues and debates, metaphysics, and a lot of everyday wisdom. All this has been in constant dialogue and argumentation. Unfortunately, these days we are given to understand as if debate, dissent, disagreement, etc. are things which have come to us from outside, that they do not belong to the Indian cultural ethos, which is utter nonsense. Look at all the great works, the foundational works of Indian civilization, right from the Vedas to the Upanishads to the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, and to other philosophical traditions. All of them raise questions, debate. All of them do not feel shy of dissent. They allow dissent. In fact, they respect dissent. So in a manner of speaking, India's spiritual heritage, its intellectual and moral heritage, its creative heritage, all together create a democratic ethos, which we have now, 70 years ago, made into a constitution for India. That's what it is. Therefore, we must not forget that constitution merely, if not merely, substantially incorporates the Indian traditions of plurality, accommodation, openness, interaction, dialogue, debate, disagreement, etc. It is the constitutions which gives us the freedom, in a legal sense, to disagree with the states or powers that be. It is the constitution which, drawing upon the, as I said, moral and intellectual and philosophical traditions of India, which have all been created by the various religions and other factors which have come into making of India, that we enjoy these freedoms. Now, what is happening, however, is that culture is being reduced to spectacle, to a bit of tamasha, which a VIP or somebody attends and then flies away, and the hundreds of millions of people, or a bit of mela thela is part of the Indian culture, Indian way of community life. But that is not all that is there for culture. There are important aspects of culture which have to be nourished. There is a vast archaeological, historical heritage which has to be taken care of. There are forms of creative expression which are in difficulties, especially after COVID, and all that has to be cared for. And therefore, we have to have an alternative vision. And part of that alternative vision will be that you cannot possibly make India a religious civilization in terms of a single religion. You have to survive as a civilization only through what Gandhiji called Sarva Dharma Sambhav. That is, every religion will have a place and every religion would be respected. If you come, how some of these ideas have to be encouraged and nourished. What are these ideas? Ideas are the ideas relating to plurality, accommodativeness, interaction, dialogue. These are the ideas which should be, and a questioning spirit, an interrogative spirit, which is sometimes called the scientific temper, which is that you should not accept anything without, and some of the greatest seers have said it. It is not as if you have to be, as Buddha said, a lamp unto yourself, apadipo bhava. Now, in more concrete terms, how some of these ideas can be promoted. One, Gram Panchayats have been kept out of the cultural map of India, as if they have nothing to do, although it is in the Grams and Gram Panchayats that a lot of culture takes place, survives, and thrives. There are any number of archaeological monuments which are neither protected by the Archaeological Survey of India nor by the Archaeology Directorate of the state governments. A single step could be taken that all archaeological or historical monuments falling within the jurisdiction of a Gram Panchayat should be transferred to the Gram Panchayats. They should own these monuments and take care of them. They will have to be trained, some funds will have to be provided, some kind of a manual of care and renovation, preservation will have to be provided. All that can be done. Our rural schools, again, are mostly located in places where culture abounds, but they are kept away from taking any part in the cultural life within the school. My suggestion would be that all schools, their teachers and their students should start collecting folk songs and other folk traditional material falling within their geography. And they should be made to feel proud of and concerned with the cultural richness of their neighborhood, whether it is in terms of crafts, in terms of folk tales. These are very rich material, and they should be made to take care of that and also to feel proud of it. Each school must celebrate, if not a day, but a week of mother tongues. You see, the language in which they are taught in this school is a standard language, but there are a whole lot of dialects which they speak at home, in the family, or in society at large. These dialects must be acknowledged within the precincts of the school by celebrating a week, as I suggest. Residences, workplaces of important writers, artists, teachers, and other intellectuals should be marked, and communities and neighborhoods encouraged to keep them in good condition. India has produced, by a simple assessment, perhaps 100 top notchers in the world of music, theatre, cinema, dance, literature in the last 50 years. What have we done to protect their places, their residences, the materials that they have left behind, which can be very interesting and inspiring for others to see? I once saw that in England there's a convention that a house in which some important person lived has a blue circle, and it is marked so that people know that such and such person lived here. There has to be at the state level a greater awareness of the broad and rich cultural heritage the state has. States have museums, but not all of them have what I would call a state folk arts survey. Something like the Archaeological Survey of India, there ought to be a folks arts survey of Madhya Pradesh or of Uttar Pradesh or whatever. Also, there ought to be the Adivasi languages and literatures. They are now coming to fruition. Many Adivasi language books are being published, but there is no attempt to put these together, not necessarily in the conventional museum form, but in a more open-ended and a more tribal life kind of a form in which these should be preserved, and they must be given due respect. Adivasis are not meant to dance around when a VIP is visiting, and that's it. That's the most insulting form of respect, if at all. What should be, they should be cared for and respected for what they are. Each state has many languages, although there are linguistic states. So say Andhra and Telangana will have Telugu, but there is also Urdu there, there is also Hindi there, and there might be other dialects. And border areas, there will be a bit of Tamil and a bit of Malayalam or whatever. So each language territory is very porous. And this idea that our language is great, but there are several neighborhood languages which are also great, should be stressed. And therefore, a state museum of languages and literature should be set up. Chairs, universities which are technical universities, now there is such a huge stress, heavy stress on instrumentalization of education, that the broad liberal education is being given up. So we are going to produce robots and persons who will have no idea, they will technically be perfect, but will have no idea of the world they are going to be thrown in after they finish their education. So in IITs, technical universities, all universities, there ought to be, in the engineering colleges, medical colleges, residencies created for writers, artists to be there and to mix with the student population, to talk to them about other aspects of life that they should know while they sort of graduate or postgraduate in some technical or whatever subject. There ought to be, I think, one of the great movements which took place in the medieval India was the Bhakti movement. It started from the south, it has gone up to the north, and it enabled the lower caste, the lower craftspeople to exercise the right of creative expression. So look at that period. You have Kabir, who is a weaver, you have Raidas, who is a cobbler, you have Namdev, who is a tailor, and such like. This was a great period, and there was an interaction. Kabir in Banaras, which is a Vatican city of Hinduism, let's say, is able to question and make fun of both the Pandits and the Maulvis, and makes both the Vedas and the Kitab sort of irrelevant for spirituality, and democratizes spirituality, which was thought to be the exclusive domain of, let's say, Brahmin or the wise ones. Now, this is a great moment in Indian history, and I said we should celebrate it throughout the country, intellectually, creatively, in different ways, because each state will have some great Bhakti poet. There are Vachana poets, there are Sangam poets, there are Alvas, and such like, and of course the Bhakti poets in the north. Coming to the national level, if you come to India, I mean to Delhi, the capital, you don't have a National Museum of Indian Literature and Indian Languages. As I said, there are more than 700 languages, and there are literatures being written. Even 26 languages are recognized by the Sahitya Akademi, as against, I think, 22 recognized by the 8th schedule of the Constitution. But there are many more languages. Now, somebody who wants to know what India is all about must be able to do so by visiting such a museum, a National Museum of Indian Literature and Languages. It could have a Rabindranath Tagore room, it could have a room for Premchand or Nirala or Mir and Ghalib and what you have. I mean, these are great figures by all accounts. So let us celebrate the great Indians, not the fake Indians, not the ones who claim to be Indian, although they deny all the values for which India has stood so far. There ought to be a National Commission of Indian Languages. You have National Commission of Minorities and National Commission of Human Rights and National Commission for Women. There ought to be a National Commission for Languages. We ought to know what is happening in our languages in terms of education, in terms of jurisprudence, in terms of information technology, in terms of education, etc. And the whole country should know what is happening to our languages, and corrective measures should be taken to see that if there are any difficulties or impediments or inadequacies, that they are corrected. There ought to be a National Artists' Writers' Welfare Fund. You see, when it comes to display ourselves, the world, in the world, what is it that you show? You don't show anything which is, let us say, the so-called modern, in which you will always be behind. Well, what do you show? The world over, India is identified in the first place with Gandhiji and Nehru. You utter the name and they'll say, oh, the country of Gandhi. They will immediately know that. Secondly, your music, your classical dance, your visual art, your miniature art, your great sculpture, Buddhist sculptures, Islamic architecture, all this is what you are known for. But the writers and artists who are struggling today to make these things, all too often in old age suffer from medical problems, and there is no welfare, social welfare scheme which covers them. So there ought to be a national artists, writers welfare fund from which people in indigent circumstances can draw assistance. This could be created by the central government by contributing amounts, getting amounts from the state governments, and also from publishing houses, from music companies, etc. You see, one of the things that is going to happen very soon is that our classical arts, especially music and dance, are now steeped in deep mediocrity because we have done nothing to save the age-old tradition of Guru Shishya Parampara. We have created modern institutions, and there was zeal for modernizing everything. We have thrown away this system. This system has its own difficulties, of course. Some distortions have also come in, but we can take care of them. And there ought to be a national program in which, let's say in the first instance, we identify 100 gurus wherever they are, all over the country, in music and dance, and provide them assistance to train 4 or 5 chosen disciples within a period of 4 to 5 years. So even if 50% of them do not amount to much in terms of performance abilities, we still have something like 250 people being produced, which will be quite a remarkable achievement if we can do that. Also, there ought to be just as you have a crafts museum in Delhi, but it's in bad shape. Because somehow today our obsession with things big is proving to be monumental folly. We are making big things, big roads, big this, big this. The life, my dear friends, survives through small things. Big things don't help ordinary people. Ordinary people want small things, things which within their domestic domain, as it were. You see, we need small things which we can handle without expertise, without having to deal with things in a awesome manner. And these small things are our crafts, whether in handmade crafts, in textile and all this. And we are known in the world for them. And crafts are one of the largest export items that India is able to handle. Now, these crafts and the craftsmen have been in a terrible condition. They have not been paid enough attention. Look at the Crafts Museum in Delhi, it is in bad shape already. So what we need is a revival of the crafts and a scheme in which crafts are promoted, including the craft of making instruments for classical music, for instance, sitar or sarod or sarangi. These are very difficult instruments to make. Let's go back to the great India of the small things rather than great India of these monumental great follies. Thank you.